He was folding the receipt again, carefully, along the same crease. The paper made a small, dry sound each time his thumb pressed it flat. A faint crackle, then silence. It lay beside the cup on the table, unmoved, waiting where he had left it. He straightened it once more, though it was already straight. Then he ran his finger along the edge as if checking for something invisible. The room was ordinary. Light fell in through a narrow window and stayed on one corner of the table. Dust moved slowly in the air, visible only when it crossed the brightness. He did not look at the dust. He did not look at the window. He kept folding the receipt. The cup in front of him had cooled. A thin line of steam had long since disappeared. He had not noticed when it did. He shifted in his chair, then leaned back, then forward again. The wood beneath him gave a quiet sound. The receipt stayed in place. There had been a sound earlier, a soft movement behind him, a pause that lasted longer than it should have. He had continued smoothing the paper, pressing the crease flatter. Outside, something passed by. A shadow moved across the window and was gone. He did not turn toward it. The receipt had a small tear near one edge. He traced it with his finger, stopped, then traced it again. The cup remained full enough to drink, untouched, cooling further without asking for attention. He adjusted the receipt so that its edges aligned perfectly with the grain of the table. He seemed satisfied for a moment. His shoulders lowered slightly. Then he adjusted it again. There had been a shift in the air, a slight difference in the weight of the room, something less than before. He had not looked up. He left the receipt where it was, not perfectly centered now, just slightly turned. Each morning, he walked past the table and glanced at it without slowing down. The cup had been washed, put away, taken out again the next day. The receipt remained. Sometimes he touched it only to move it a fraction of an inch, closer to the edge, then back toward the middle. He never threw it away. Afternoons carried the same quiet weight. Light moved across the surface of the table and faded. Evenings settled in without announcement. He would sit down and place his hand near the receipt, not on it, close enough to feel the thinness of the paper under his palm, without contact. Once, he folded it again. The same crease, the same careful pressure. He unfolded it almost immediately, smoothing it flat as if the fold had been a mistake. Days passed in small repetitions. The chair scraped lightly against the floor. His fingers rested, lifted, rested again. There were moments when he almost turned his head toward the doorway behind him, a reflex that rose and fell within a second. He remained facing forward. The receipt began to look softer at the edges from being handled. But it did not change. It did not leave. He adjusted it before leaving the room each night. Aligned it with the table's grain. Pressed it down once. Firmly, as if securing something fragile. He never tried to remember what was printed on it. He did not read it again. He only kept it there. And every time he passed the table, there was a faint hesitation in his step, so small it barely interrupted his movement. But it was there. One afternoon, his hand hovered over the receipt longer than usual. Not touching, not adjusting, just hovering. The room felt smaller that day. Air pressed in from the walls. Even the light seemed thinner, as if it had passed through something before reaching the table. He sat down slowly. The chair made the same quiet sound it always made. He waited for it to settle before he did. He did not smooth the paper. He did not align it with the table's grain. He only looked at it. The edges were no longer sharp. They had softened from his fingers, from days of careful pressure, from folding and unfolding the same narrow crease. He noticed that. His thumb moved toward the fold. Stopped. Pulled back. There had been a moment. He could almost see it now. Not clearly. Just the shape of it. A figure near the doorway. A stillness that had waited without asking. He had felt something then. A small awareness rising in his chest. Brief. Almost inconvenient. He had pressed the fold flatter instead. The memory did not arrive fully. It came in fragments. The sound of fabric shifting. Breath held for half a second too long. The quiet expectation of someone who had not yet decided to leave. He leaned back. His hands rested on his knees. The receipt stayed in place. He imagined what might have happened if he had turned his head. Not the words, just the turning. The simple act of meeting someone's eyes. His jaw tightened for a moment, then released. He reached forward finally, lifted the receipt halfway off the table, held it there. The paper trembled slightly between his fingers. Or perhaps it was his hand. He lowered it again without folding it. For a while, he watched the place where it had almost left the table. Then he looked away first. That evening, he did not sit down right away. He stood near the table, close enough to see the faint crease running through the center of the receipt. He did not touch it. The room held its shape. Nothing shifted. Nothing waited anymore. He pulled out the chair slowly and sat, but not as near to the table as before. There was a small distance now between his chest and the edge of the wood. The receipt remained exactly where it had been lowered. He looked at it as if it belonged to another afternoon. Another version of the room. His hand moved forward once. Paused halfway. Then settled back onto his lap. He let the paper stay slightly misaligned. Not straight with the grain. Not centered. He noticed that he was not fixing it. Outside, light faded without ceremony. The window darkened. The reflection of the table replaced the view beyond it. He could see himself faintly in the glass. Still, facing forward, there would be no sound from the doorway. No fabric shifting. No held breath waiting to be answered. He knew that now. Not sharply, but steadily. The receipt lay flat, unchanged. It did not ask to be folded again. It did not ask to be kept. He reached for it last. Not carefully this time. He lifted it fully off the table, held it in the air for a brief second. Then he placed it back down. Not aligned. Not pressed flat. Just resting there. He leaned back in the chair and let his hands remain empty. The table looked larger without his fingers arranging something on it. After a while, he stood and left the room. The receipt stayed where he had left it. Not every opportunity disappears. Some simply do not return. Quietly. Without warning. If you have ever thought, I should have acted then, this story may have reached you.